What's up, you guys? Ross Sapp, managing editor, Fightful.com, FightfulMMA.com, FightfulBoxing.com. Head over to any of the three to get all your combat sports news, photos, videos, podcasts, and the like. Obviously, a huge weekend in MMA. There's a big one in pro wrestling as well. Lots of stuff going on. UFC 229. We're also going to look forward to Bellator this weekend. Just tons of stuff going on. We had the UFC 229 post-show podcast. We had, I basically started a new podcast just to talk about the show on Saturday or Sunday as well. Just a ton of content there, and we're here to talk even more about it. We've got Showdown Joe joining us, and we also have James Lynch, who was absent Saturday night because he was there in Las Vegas. James, I'm glad to see that you survived.
I did. Yeah, I was lucky. Now, I want to explain one thing quickly off the bat. Luckily, I was not cage side because they put the media room actually outside the arena, which was kind of interesting. I'll talk about that later. But yes, I'm here and did not get Mortal Kombat kicked by Khabib Nurmagomedov. So that's good.
Well, there's still time in your life for that to happen. Joe, we are a few days removed from this situation. Has anything changed that maybe affects your viewing of the incident?
At the moment, no. I mean, in terms of assessing some of the stories that have come out, what's been done, what hasn't been done as of yet, nothing has really changed my positioning from Saturday night. I do remain steadfast that, if anyone is to blame on this, I've seen a few different articles out there and things out there talking about who's to blame. Was it Khabib fully for this? Was it Conor? Was it the UFC? The bottom line is that what it all boils down to is Khabib Nurmagomedov. That's just for me, and I hate it because I love the guy. But the reality is, he quote unquote broke the rules.
James, you were there. It was a wild night. I say, ultimately, as much of a black eye as it is for the UFC, I've said this on so many podcasts, we tripled our WrestleMania live viewers on Saturday. It's a great thing for the UFC. They were the belle of the ball this weekend. Everybody was talking about them. It was unbelievable. Just walk me through what you experienced working the event.
Well, it was a great event. I mean, the thing that's getting lost here, unfortunately, is this was one of the best cards of the year. It had a bit of everything, finishes, comeback finishes like with Derrick Lewis. You had probably one of the fights of the year in Tony Ferguson and Anthony Pettis. And then you have this main event where Conor McGregor loses. And this was a moment where Khabib Nurmagomedov could have, buried the hatchet. He could have been recognized as one of the greatest lightweights of all time, not taking anything away from what he did in the cage. But then all this happens and it completely goes out the window. And instead of talking at the press conference about some of the great performances that took place at UFC 229, we're talking about how long is Khabib Nurmagomedov going to be suspended? Is his visa going to get taken away? Is he getting stripped? All these, hypotheticals. And it just sort of, it was funny when I was covering this event, the thing I was thinking of is I was like, wow, this is like the first event I've covered in like a while where nothing's happened, in terms of like anything bad. I was at 223 with the Dolly incident. I was at, International Fight Week where Holloway's pulled during Fight Week. We had none of that leading up to, basically the main event. And then this happens and it just, it put a damper on it. I think a lot of people there, we really were, amped about this event. We're really happy the way everything sort of unfolded. But to have this happen really sort of put a sour mood in there. And you could feel the tension. It was weird, even in the media tent, just the feeling that, we'd all been sort of let down at the end with what had transpired. And, everyone, like, I don't even think people were paying attention to what was happening at the presser because everyone was looking at videos of the different angles of what had happened. So it just sort of added a big distraction to what was one of the best cards we've seen this year.
And of course, everybody has an opinion, and that's okay. Everybody's entitled to have an opinion. But I will say one thing, guys. You don't have to come to us for your MMA news, but don't go to Stephen A. Smith. Please don't go to Stephen A. Smith. Don't go to the online memes that talk about Conor McGregor getting choked. You can get choked with the jaw lock, but the man was in danger of having his jaw dislocated, his teeth yanked out. I saw somebody say, bite down in your mouth guard and gut through it. And I'm like, he physically couldn't bite. That's what a jaw lock does. But the fight is lost in everything because of the fight that happened afterwards. Now, let's go ahead and talk about this. Obviously, Khabib Nurmagomedov jumped into the crowd. One of the popular talking points is, well, you can't talk about religion. You can't do this. You can't do that. To which my response is, yeah, you can. You can do all that stuff because it happened. And Khabib Nurmagomedov in the lead up to this said, this is not a sport that is built on trash talk. It's not built on this. It's not built on that. And he goes out in the crowd and does that. Now, I mean, you're not going to have to give me a whole lot of different reasons, Joe, to go and want to fight Dylan Dennis. He gives you plenty of them on his own. But I think that stuff's fair game. Ultimately, Khabib Nurmagomedov beat the man that frustrated him into submission in a cage. The ultimate display of dominance.
I would say from a North American perspective, if not a somewhat global perspective, mostly you're bang on with that assessment. Pretty much anything is fair game. We saw what Chael Sonnen used to do to Anderson Silva, telling him that, make sure his wife makes his steak a certain way. He'll slap her on the butt and stuff like that. I mean, there's certain things.
It's a Rick Rude promo.
Yeah, Rick Rude promo. So there's certain things that are going to be said. There's certain things that should not be said. Also, in my opinion, I do understand what Khabib Nurmagomedov and his camp are saying, because in that part of the world, it's a different culture. I can speak pretty heavily on the Japanese culture and how they're honorable and whatnot. So I get and I understand where Khabib is coming from because of having been around this game for such a long time and understanding, going back to my stories, you guys have heard it here before on the podcast, of Vladimir Matyuchenko. And just the way of thinking in that part of the world, especially when it comes to talking about culture, country, and in Khabib's case, religion, they take things to heart. They take it seriously. They don't see it as pre-fight hype. And even in Khabib's apology and statement to the media afterwards, if you saw it, I'm sure you saw it, Sean, James, you were there, but if people saw that, he was part remorseful and part, look, this is why I did it. I'm here to make the sport clean. You're not supposed to talk about someone's family. You're not supposed to talk about their country or religion, when in reality, where we come from, hey, man, that's fair game. That's just anything to get inside your opponent's head. So I do have sympathy and empathy for a guy like Khabib Nurmagomedov, whose way of thinking is different than the way we look at things. I don't condone what he did. He should have did it. But the emotions got the best of him. James, what I mentioned on Saturday's post-event podcast was the fact that here's a guy who made it to the apex of the mountain. He made it to the summit. He has officially looked at his career and did exactly what every single fighter has ever wanted to do, become a world champion and take out the poster child, in essence, taking the torch, becoming somewhat of a poster child and a star, and in the blink of an eye, within 15 to 20 seconds, ruined it all by being too emotional.
I would argue that maybe he didn't ruin it all, because I think he went from a 500,000 pay-per-view buy guy to probably a 700 pay-per-view thousand buy guy on his own.
I could see that side. Yes.
For better or for worse. I mean, when you have Mike Tyson out there, and I would love to hear the worst takes you all have heard about this so far. One of which actually comes from Mike Tyson, where he says, "This is crazier than anything I've ever done." I was like, you bit a man's ear off his head. James, it's been a few days. There are some terrible takes about this situation. What's some of the worst you've seen?
The worst one I've seen actually wasn't on the brawl itself, but I had someone explain to me that Conor McGregor is, in fact, get this, overrated. Okay? So, apparently the knocking out Jose Aldo, knocking out Eddie Alvarez, knocking out Chad Mendez, those were all, we shouldn't care. We shouldn't put any stock into those. I just things like that. I've also just heard, there was a boxing writer going off on how, you don't see this in boxing. Meanwhile, I seem to remember Holyfield and Tyson not only brawling in the crowd, brawling in the casino. Do you remember this? Like, it's crazy that people have such a short memory of what this happens in boxing all the time. And I mean, at the end of the day, did anyone get seriously hurt? I mean, nothing that we've heard. It's not a good look when you have a champion jump off the cage. I get that, but on the flip side of it, it's like this happens in other sports. It's just that with MMA, there's always people waiting on the sidelines for something like this to happen and jump on it and say, these guys are animals, or, this and that. Like, it's just, you're going to get those people coming out. And we saw a few takes like that. I can't remember the boxing writer's name. Probably a good thing. Don't want to give this guy any press, but he basically just said that, this is why nobody watches MMA and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, dude, look at your own sport in boxing. There's been plenty of instances like that.
Well, it looks like 2 or 3 million people almost bought this pay-per-view, and the rematch will do well over 3 if that ever occurs. It's an easy 3 million. Joe, what are some of the worst takes you've seen so far?
Well, it's you and I talked about it. We've seen some stuff online. James, I think, echoed it. The whole Conor McGregor is overrated, recency bias, right? Like they forgot what he's done in the past. And, you know, for the most part, when it comes to some of these critics of Conor McGregor or critics of Khabib Nurmagomedov, they're not able to potentially look into the backstory or look into what led up to all of this. You don't do that kind of stuff. I mean, Conor McGregor is a fantastic fighter. He got beat by a much better fighter that evening. Conor McGregor could easily have landed some of those left hands, and we'd be talking about a different scenario right now where Conor McGregor is arguably the GOAT. Right. So, I mean, it's a fight, guys. Anything can happen. Some of the takes that I've seen and some of the takes that I've read, again, I've been around this game for a long time, guys. I brush it to the side. I shake my head. I don't address it. I can tell you this, some of the stuff that Sean and I said on Saturday, some of the stuff that, or Saturday night, and some of the stuff that we may have tweeted or put on social media gets twisted. It gets twisted. And it's like, well, I never said that. But if I go and reply, or go that I imply that, if I go and reply to every single person, James, I'd be online from Saturday up until now. So it's one of those things where it's like, this is my opinion. This is Sean's opinion. This is what James Lynch is saying. He's there. This is what it's all about. You can take it and twist it as much as you want. The facts are the facts, and here's what it is. And we're discussing potentially what could happen. Don't tell me Conor McGregor is overrated. That dude's a bad MOFO. Like, he is a bad man with tons of skill. He just got outclassed that evening by a guy whose game plan was succinct. Simple.
Yeah, I don't mind people who don't follow MMA or don't really know about it talking about it. That's beautiful. I love people learning and seeing what we love. It's when the meme makers that don't know anything about MMA get involved and they create some of the dumbest stuff I've ever seen. Let's talk about the fight itself. I thought round 4 was a really good adjustment from Khabib. He dominated really the first 2 rounds, even dropped Conor McGregor with a big punch. I personally thought Conor McGregor was not aggressive enough offensively. It seemed like he was trying to fight defensively an awful lot. And then in the 3rd round, that changed. And you saw him start to get a little more offensive, and that took Khabib out of his comfort zone. And I think that once Khabib felt that momentum shift a little bit, he was like, it's time to put the pedal to the floor. I'm going to give everything I can to get this power double, and I'm going to finish him now. Because I think he felt that momentum shift. And I didn't expect Conor McGregor to try to play the long game, but I don't think he thought he would have to either. There's so much into this. I thought Conor McGregor had a much better showing than anybody is giving him credit for, but ultimately he fell victim to a beautiful jaw lock submission from Khabib Nurmagomedov. James, your assessment?
Yeah, I thought that Conor just, he had his moments. I believe he stole around from Khabib in this fight, which has never happened in his UFC career. So that was impressive in itself. But I don't see the reason to, and I'm not saying you suggested this, but I see a lot of other people suggesting them doing the rematch right away. I don't think it's necessary. This was a dominant fight by Khabib. I think he had an answer for everything, not just with the ground game, but with the stand-up. The fact that he was able to drop McGregor in the fight, I think was very unexpected for people to see. McGregor had his moments. I think this wasn't the McGregor that we've seen in other fights. This didn't look like the McGregor, like we saw against Eddie Alvarez or against Jose Aldo that was, really aggressive from the get-go. I agree with you. I think he was playing sort of more of a counter game. But at the end of the day, I mean, Khabib Nurmagomedov showed that he's the better fighter, and I don't really want to see this rematch anytime soon. I think McGregor's got to, build his way back up, whether that's 1 fight, 2 fights, I don't know. But the UFC has to be smart about this. I was thinking about this morning. I've seen some people say, if McGregor doesn't fight Khabib, if Khabib is suspended, get him to fight Ferguson. It's like, no, you give McGregor a fun, exciting fight next, whether that's Nate Diaz or whoever, but you don't give him someone that's going to threaten him with little upside. This is what they did to Rousey. I mean, Rousey ended up fighting Holm, and then she fought Nunes, and then she was out of the sport. You have to be careful with McGregor here. Make sure that he's matched up appropriately, and then get him back to a potential Khabib fight down the line.
Joe, I think the Nate Diaz fight's there in 10 years if they want it. They don't need to do that now, or they could, but I mean, there are lots of Conor McGregor gets a broomstick does a million pies.
In terms of who Conor McGregor should be fighting next, guys, we need to look at it from not just a mixed martial arts rankings perspective. I think James is sort of bang on. You're talking at the point now, they learned their lesson from Ronda Rousey, putting her against opponents that are going to take away that ATM, right? Conor McGregor is an ATM for them. So it's a matter of deciding, do you put him in the rematch? He's probably going to lose. Good chance, because we've already seen it. Do we put him against Tony Ferguson, who's not going to quit? and we'll stand and trade with Conor McGregor. If that fight goes down to the ground, I'm going to give the edge to Tony Ferguson with his jiu-jitsu. Do we do the Nate Diaz fight again after the situation with, or after the result of Dustin Poirier? We know what we get when Conor McGregor fights Nate Diaz. We're going to get 3 rounds of absolute awesomeness. That's the fight I think should be taking place, and or a fight where the opponent's ground game is on par, if not a little worse than Conor McGregor's. That's who I'm thinking. If they want to maximize the revenue that they can generate from Conor McGregor, which they make a lot of, you're going to put him against a guy that hopefully he wins. You know, sorry to the opponent, but from a UFC's perspective, this is a money-making venture, and Conor McGregor is their biggest moneymaker. You want the guy to win, and that's just the way it is. It's not the right way. It's not the ethical way, but you're there to make money, and Conor McGregor is a moneymaker. Put him against a guy that's going to have an exciting fight that hopefully won't tap him out, although Nate did tap him out. But we saw what happened in the second fight. These two guys are more than happy to have the referee move out of the way and throw down. Are there other people in there? Yeah, you can probably do it, but those are the three options right now for Conor. We'll see what option number 4 is, but it's going to have to be someone, in my opinion, that'll be more than happy to stand and bang with him. Heck, you can do the Dustin Poirier rematch if you like. You can sell that one if Dustin Poirier defeats Nate Diaz.
I think you could sell win or lose any of those guys against. I mean, Conor is coming off a loss, and people will just pay to see him fight. James, as far as punishment goes, what do you see as fitting?
I think we'll just quickly on the 2 opponents, or the opponents you guys mentioned for McGregor there. 2 names we haven't brought up that I think would be great opponents for him. One is Justin Gaethje. I think he's a guy who's going to stand and trade with you. And yes, McGregor did get hit on Saturday, but 9 times out of 10, if he's fighting someone in the lightweight division and staying standing, I like his chances. I think that's a good fight. Gaethje not really known as a ground guy. And the other one is Jose Aldo. If he wants to move up to 155 and get some revenge there, I think that would be an interesting matchup too. Aldo does have a great ground game, but I think at the same time, I don't think it's anywhere near the threat that Khabib put on with the wrestling and the ground game. I think it would be, those are 2 matchups that I think have some name value, but also fights that I think McGregor could absolutely win. And in terms of McGregor, getting the punishment he took, who knows when he wants to come back, but I imagine we won't see him till next year, just with everything sort of unfolding and the dust settling. The UFC is going to want to use him as a chip in early 2019. So I think if we do see him come back, it'll be sometime next year.
Yeah, I think we can expect that as well. The lightweight title situation is a funny one. Going into Saturday night, 3 men had legitimate claim to that title. Now only 2 men do. Tony Ferguson was one of those. I actually spoke to a group of WWE wrestlers who were watching that show, and they really, really enjoyed the Pettis fight, as well as Derrick Lewis's post-fight interview, which we will get into. Now, Pettis wasn't considered a top-notch opponent for Tony Ferguson, James, but we learned more and more about Ferguson as this went on. He did no physical therapy. He came back 6 months after knee surgery. We knew that. Kind of psycho, but that's par for the course for Tony Ferguson. What do you see next for him? Is it Khabib? I mean, he's got to feel a little frustrated in that regard that he's chased this fight for so long, and here this fight is maybe going away from him again.
Tony has got to fight Khabib next, and Dana White sort of alluded to this, and I know there's times when Dana will say stuff and it doesn't end up coming true, or maybe he's fibbing us a little bit, but it seemed like he was more interested in doing Tony versus Khabib next as opposed to the rematch, and I'm a fan of that. I think Ferguson, from the second he was at the open workouts doing that cool, sort of breakdancing stuff, to him at the press conference after, really just entertaining everyone. I mean, he's literally like asking questions to the media members. This guy is just something completely unique, and I really hope that translates to fans outside of our bubble, because I think he is not only just great in terms of his skill set and what he showed against Anthony Pettis, but also just outside on the mic. He's talking about quitting drinking and all this stuff. Like he was just so entertaining, and I think that's the fight you have to do at this point. Ferguson's stock, I think, despite everything that happened on Saturday, I think it's never been higher with him, winning and him carrying around the belt still. I'm a huge fan of Tony Ferguson, and I hope we do see the Khabib fight, because honestly, I think that's a much different fight for Khabib, just with the fact that you have a guy in Ferguson who nobody's really figured out, in his last couple fights. He had the loss to Michael Johnson years ago, but he broke his arm in that fight. So I'm curious to see how a fight with him and Khabib would go, but that would be my pick. I hope they do that fight next.
How about you, Joe? Where do you see Tony Ferguson going next?
Depending on the suspension Khabib Nurmagomedov is about to get, whether it's 6 months to a year, and whatever fine he has, is Tony Ferguson willing to wait to take him on? And if there's no 165-pound division to be introduced between Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz. Does he fight the winner of that? There's lots of options there. There's also Rafael. Oh no, sorry, that's 155. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, the fight is Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. That is the fight that must happen. Unfortunately, every time they try and put these two together, it's a gong show. It never takes place. That is the fight that needs to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon. And is Tony willing to wait and wait out the suspension? Because the division then will be on hold again. So in terms of Tony fighting someone, it's going to have to be someone, does he become the de facto champ? If it's a 1-year suspension, is Khabib stripped and does Tony become the de facto champ? Or does he have to fight for another interim title? Right? So it all depends on what's going to happen with Khabib.
Meanwhile, you have a push for a 165 division. Dana White is frustratingly stubborn about this, James. I don't understand it. It'll make people who can't win the title at welterweight and lightweight move down. Keep in mind, this will be likely Khabib Nurmagomedov, your champion in the division, probably moving up. Rafael Dos Anjos, a former champion, probably moving down. There are, I think, 200 fighters in between the two divisions. It is a ready-made escape from your issue at UFC 230. It's right there for you. He can say, oh, I don't create titles out of thin air. Women's featherweight has existed for almost 2 years and doesn't have rankings. What is your take on this, James?
Yeah, I mean, they have fumbled the ball big time on this whole 230 thing. Now we're hearing Daniel Cormier might be fighting Derrick Lewis for the title because Lewis's stock has never been higher with him. I'm sure we'll talk about him later. But, I mean, it's to me, as far as adding in a new division, I don't know what goes into it. I think if they add – I'm not a fan of adding in more weight classes. I think if you do 165 is the division to do it just with the level of talent there. Does that change now with Conor losing? That might be something they would look at. Does that happen for 230? I don't know, but maybe they do it down the line. But here's the thing that's really killing the UFC right now, especially when it comes to pay-per-views. They got to get rid of this rule that it has to be for a title. They could have just made this Dustin and Nate from the get-go, and no one would be complaining, and people would be happy to see this 5 rounds. Why does it have to be for a stupid title? No one cares. The fans don't care. No one goes, wow, I can't wait to go to that title fight. They go, wow, I can't wait to watch, such and such fight. Like, I don't even think people cared that the title was on the line this weekend. People outside of, that are part of, outside of the bubble, they just want to see 2 people fight. And I think that if they just would have gone from the onset saying, hey, listen, it's going to be Dustin and Nate for 5 rounds, people would be happy with that. But instead, they've completely fumbled this ball. I don't know how many times, and who knows what it's going to end up being by the time we're even done this podcast. They could change their mind about 3 or 4 times.
I would argue that Conor McGregor losing may actually increase the chances of a 165-pound title because you could immediately put him in there with the winner of Dustin Poirier, Nate Diaz, and say, oh, here's a championship fight. Here's your 3 division, your first ever person to win titles in 3 divisions. Joe, we talked about 165 a lot, but there is a bit of a monkey. I mean, Nate Diaz and Dustin Poirier did give them an easy out. Last week, it was revealed they sacrificed Joanna and Shevchenko to run Shevchenko versus Sijara Eubanks. That's horrible. That's miserable. That's a dumb idea. But then this week, fresh off of a Derrick Lewis win, Derrick Lewis also very popular with the WWE wrestlers this weekend, I was told, and his come-from-behind win over Alexander Volkov is rumored to be in negotiations to fight Daniel Cormier. Now, keep in mind, Daniel Cormier said, I am not healthy. I cannot fight by then. Derrick Lewis, after his fight, says, I've got no business being in a title fight, and they're about to possibly be booked for a title fight. Still, with both of those things weighed, I think it's a far better possible main event than Shevchenko and Sijara Eubanks, Joe.
Yeah. To go back what James was saying momentarily, if I can just go back to discussing that 165-pound division and making it a championship, I respectfully disagree, only because in my experience, what I do know is fans do love title fights. They want fights that have meaning, and you can create the 165. Listen, Dana White said women would never be in the UFC. Okay, he said the 155 division would never, ever happen in the UFC, and then BJ Penn came around, and then we got 145, and then it'll never happen, 135 will never happen, 125 will never happen, and then they bought the WEC, then they saw stars, then they added those divisions. So Dana White saying that there's no reason for the 165-pound weight class, I respect, he said it too many times in the past. In terms of creating the 165 division, you then move 170 to 175. You've got your 10-pound difference between the two weight classes. Therefore, you will have champions. Now, in terms of we don't need championship fights for every single pay-per-view. I get that. That's fair. That's a fair assessment. I personally believe when you put a championship title on the line, it officially gives meaning to a fight. It officially has fans drawn in to say, this fight means something. It's not just two guys fighting out of nowhere. Because how many times do we look at the UFC or the Fight Pass prelims or even some of the prelims that are on Fox and think, the heck are these guys or girls? And what are they fighting for? They're not even in the top 15. Why are we watching this fight? Give the fights and fans meaning to a fight. They will tune in. I'm not saying to make this an ABC like boxing where there's so many different weight classes and so many championships. What I'm saying is when you make it for a title fight, people will be more inclined to tune in than to just have two names on that. Regarding Derrick Lewis.
Sorry, just 1 second. What about if you just made it as a #1 contender spot? Would that not be the same thing as opposed to not having a title? They could have done that with this fight and not had a title on the line, and it's still meaning. People would want to know, hey, whoever wins this fight is going to fight Khabib next. That would add meaning. I realize then you screw things up with, if there's injuries and stuff like that. But I'm saying that's another alternative you could do as opposed to going to the extreme of adding in a title. Just wanted to add that in. Sorry to interrupt you, Sean.
Then that example there gives meaning to the fight.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Stakes.
Yeah.
Give me something to pay attention to. Give the fans something to watch and say, you know what? I got to watch this fight because there are implications. Fine, no title? Cool. The winner of this fight fights the champ. This is going to be awesome. Give the fans something to tune in for in a main event. All fights, guys, in my opinion, have to have some sort of meaning. What does this fight mean to the weight class? That's what I'm saying. Derrick Lewis and Daniel Cormier, I do not see that fight happening. I don't see it happening.
At the same time, I think that if you were to call it a #1 contender fight, I don't know how many people buy it. I think you almost run into some cynicism there because you got Tony Ferguson ahead of all these guys. And he should, I mean, my God, if you're talking about moral implications, he's the rightful lightweight champion right now. And then you see that and you see what happened with Khabib. I don't know how many people would buy these guys fighting a Khabib anytime soon. Maybe. And if you're UFC, you definitely do not want to go interim title in this division again. This has been the biggest mess. But I'll ask you this, James. Do you think we get Derrick Lewis, Daniel Cormier at UFC 230?
I don't think so. Just because we're hearing that Cormier's hand is still not 100% healed, and then Lewis. I mean, he's going to go 5 rounds. He can barely go 3 against Volkov. If 11 seconds runs out on that clock on Saturday, we're talking about Alexander Volkov winning a decision. They got sort of lightning in the bottle with Lewis winning and him just being at the all-time high right now. I get it, but I think that's going to be tough because really for DC, there is a chance he could lose here, and then he loses out on the payday with Brock. So I think that alone probably keeps us from happening, but you never know. I didn't think we'd see Sijara Eubanks in a UFC main event for a title this year either. So what are you going to do?
Well, I mean, I think there's definitely a reason why they didn't try to move Curtis Blades off of his fight for a Daniel Cormier fight or say, hey, Stipe, here's your rematch.
Exactly.
Because they want to keep that Lesnar fight together. But the thing is, if Daniel Cormier were to lose, they could very easily slide John Jones into that Lesnar fight. There's a lot of things that could happen. And I never buy that. Even now, how can you buy that something's really going to happen when they announce Joanna versus Shevchenko and everybody goes, I don't want to say everybody. That's a sweeping generalization. But a lot of people are like, hell yeah, that's the fight to make. That's the right one. And they sacrifice it for a woman who is 1-1 in weight cuts in her pro UFC career. It's wild to me. But I know what you mean. Derrick Lewis's stock has never been higher, may never be higher. My balls was hot.
I was just going to say his stock is hot, boys.
And Dana White had no idea. That's how crazy that night was.
I know.
He had no idea. And he said, I wish that was the craziest thing that happened. And somebody messaged me and said, I can't believe he brought up Trump. And I said, did he? Because I didn't even notice. That was like the 5th craziest thing he said in that promo.
So awesome. It's crazy.
That was wild. Another person I want to give some, not necessarily give love to, but there are 2 big names that I thought really emerged in that show. Joe, you and I have talked about it, but I want to talk to James about them because you spoke to both of them ahead of this. Dom Reyes, Aspen Ladd. I think Dom Reyes now is a top 5 UFC light heavyweight. I think Aspen Ladd, boy, she is problems for a lot of people.
Yeah, Reyes, first off, I think he knocked out OSP at the end. I know the clock kind of ran out on that one, but that would have been pretty incredible if that did.
Before you get into it, I want your feelings on this. Didn't change the result, but if I'm Mir Abdivavashvili, are you not saying, wait a second, that's not a knockout? Because I'm pretty sure that was a knockout in my fight.
Yeah, exactly. Against his fight against Ricky Simone. Yeah, I mean, either way, Reyes looked great in this fight, whether you want to count that as a finish or not. This was the test. I mean, I've said this before, and this is no slight on OSP, but he is the gatekeeper in this division. If you beat an OSP, especially the way Dominic Reyes did, you're to me above the, you're sort of in the upper pack, like you said, top 5 in that division. I completely agree with that. The thing I liked about this fight too is that we saw Reyes not just go out there and get a quick finish. We got to see him, go 3 rounds, show a little bit more of his game. Oftentimes when you see guys like, Francis Ngannou is a good example where, you just see these quick wins and then we don't get to see them how they, going into deep waters. To me, this was good. I thought overall this was great. I like the call out of Jan Blachowicz, in the sense that this is a guy that, I think if he's got a lot of experience, it's a winnable fight for Dom. And Dom's not being unrealistic here in his expectations. He's not calling out John Jones. If he did that, yeah, it would make some headlines, but he's not going to, people aren't actually expecting that fight to happen. This is a fight that likely will happen next, and I think it's the right move for Dom, who's, really amassed an impressive record here and just a fun guy and gets it too. You should have seen him at Media Day all dressed up. I mean, this guy is really playing the part, and he's come a long way for a guy who, signed with the UFC. I think it was either last year, year before. I think it was last year. So he's really done quite well. And Aspen Ladd, I mean, great job. I think people, she had a lot of pressure going into this fight because of the, missing weight against Leslie Smith. She had a tough weight cut for this one, but I think what people forget in this, at least I haven't seen a lot of it online, the scale was off at either the UFC PI or her hotel room. That's why she came in under. So I think the fact that she had to cut those extra pounds, or the extra pound, because she came in at 134, I think was, just a result of just a bad scale in this one. But either way, she's got to get the weight cuts down a little bit more. I asked her post-fight if she's interested in going to 45, because who knows what's happening with that division. She basically said, I'll only go if there's fights that are interesting to me. So right now she's got her eye on either Beth Correia or Kat Zingano, but this was a great performance. Tanya Evinger, former Invicta champ, fought the who's who in the women's division. That's the first time she's lost by knockout in the first round. Chris Cyborg, it took her 3 rounds to do that. Aspen made a statement on this card, and it was just great to see, because there was a lot of people, giving her crap about the weight cut, and she came through on this card.
Yeah, the new UFC rankings are out. I will add that, the UFC rankings breakdown, to FightfulSelect.com, Tier 1, $5. I've also added more and more MMA content. We have alternate fight commentary on MVP and John Jones's first MMA fights. We do If It Were a Work, If It Were a Shoot podcast on there, where we kind of go back and forth between WWE, UFC, and vice versa. Also, on Tier 2, the $10 tier, you get early access to a couple of McGregor Khabib columns, as well as a bare knuckle boxing interview Carlos did. But in the new rankings, Dom Reyes, number 6, he's behind Manoa, who I argue Dom Reyes should be ranked higher than him, because you look at Manoa's recent track record. He beat Corey Anderson and he beat OSP, but man, he's like he's won 2 fights since May of 2015. I just think that Dom Reyes' track record is better, and Aspen Ladd is now at number 7. So they are quickly emerging up those rankings. There's a PFL card this weekend. Do either of you have any idea what's on it?
I do, only because I interviewed a few of the fighters beforehand, yes. but in general, it's just tough to keep up. Like, I missed the PFL event that happened. I think it was Friday, just because I'm in the middle of media week. There was actually a UFC launch party they had where I got to interview Kevin Lee and TJ Dillashaw. So I missed that. But I think in general, it's tough to keep up with this. I've said this before. You've got the Ultimate Fighter, you've got PFL, you've got all these other things going on, Bellator. It's just tough to keep up. I like the format, but it's tough to keep up. That's kind of the best way to put it.
The show this weekend, as I look, it's in Long Beach, and it goes head-to-head with the Bellator show. Bellator running back-to-back nights. We're about to talk about that, actually. Will Brooks is on the show, facing Rashid Magomedov. That's a good fight. You have Islam Mamedov against Thiago Tavares. That's another good fight. Johnny Case on the show. Rama's fighting. Dan Spawn's on the card. Magaleus. So some okay fights, but I kind of want to speak about Bellator before we preview the shows. There are rumors, and if Dana White stays true to his word, Islam Makhachev and Tukhugov would essentially be cut from the UFC because of their participation in this brawl after the fight. Joe, I don't think there's any question Bellator would pick them up immediately if they could. I mean, why wouldn't they?
Oh, they'll pick them up. No ifs, ands, or buts. But it all depends on what their suspension is also going to be with the commission, with the Nevada State Athletic Commission, and where they'll be allowed to fight. Because as soon as you get suspended from the Nevada State Athletic Commission, you go on, the ABC's records, and then you can't basically compete in North America. Can you compete overseas? It's got to be sanctioned and regulated by somebody. Chances are it's going to be sanctioned and regulated most likely by one of the Indian reserves. So that all depends. Now, will Dana White cut them? I think so. I think they're done. I think they've, again, I saw the interpretation by Kareem Zidane of Tugov's post. It was very brief, but at the same time, he's done. It's unfortunate because he's 3-1 in the UFC and probably has some and Islam was in Bahrain when I was there with Frankie Edgar, Renzo, and Khabib and stuff like that. So, I know him okay, and it is what it is. Before we go over to the Bellator stuff, guys, if I can just make one thing regarding the light heavyweight rankings, I want both your opinion. Dominic Reyes is ranked right now. He moved up 6 spots to number 6, but Anthony Smith dropped 1 to number 10. Can you make the argument that Anthony Smith should be higher than Dominic Reyes right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
And
These
I think
rankings,
Anthony
man.
Smith should be higher than OSP, Teixeira, maybe Anderson. I think Manoa should be down there. I think 5 and 6. 5, 6, and 7 should be Reyes, Smith, Anderson, any combination. I don't want to say any combination of them. Smith probably belongs up the highest. James, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Anthony Smith should be a lot higher because I get that his last 2 wins are against guys that are, Rashad retired and then Shogun's probably close to retiring. But in general, I think those are still quality opposition as far as the division goes, because there isn't, after that top tier, you're going to have to fight guys like that. And it's not like he just went to a decision with them. He finished them. So I put some stock in that. Yeah, these rankings need some adjusting for sure. One quick thing I wanted to mention on the suspensions or the potential fighters getting cut there. I'm not so sure they get cut. And here's my argument why. Khabib is super close with both of those guys, especially Islam Makhachev. I think this would ruffle a lot of feathers if they were cut, and I don't think they go to Bellator. You look at they are Ali Abdelaziz clients. How many Ali Abdelaziz clients are in Bellator? I can tell you right now on my hand. We can count it on my hand. There's 3 clients he has in Bellator. Paul Daly and Vitaly Minakov, he just signed recently, and the other one's Gracie. What's his name? The undefeated guy fights at welterweight. His name's escaping me at the moment. But anyways, he doesn't have a lot of fighters in Bellator. If they do get cut, which I don't think they will, they're going to PFL. Mark my words.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect. And I mean, Paul Daly ain't going to the UFC for reasons beyond his control. Minakov has been stuck for I don't know what the hell's going on with Minakov.
He's going back to Bellator.
Bellator had the balls to post on their Twitter feed, should Vitaly Minakov fight the winner of the heavyweight tournament? And I'm thinking, why are you doing a fucking tournament? He was the champion. Why is this happening? I'm waiting for them to post a tweet that says, should the winner of Minakov versus the tournament winner fight Cole Conrad next? I'm like, God, man, it's a mess, man. And I love the tournament aspect, but there's so much other stuff to dive into, to break down. Jose Aldo wants a rematch with Conor McGregor. I think that's a pay-per-view headliner. I think that with no title on the line, there are rumors that Conor, after one of the rounds, like whispered in Khabib's ear, "It's only business." I don't know if you guys have seen that.
No.
Like kind of mumbled to him, "It's only business." And then Khabib turned around to him. Maybe not so much. Khabib's dad says he's going to punish his son tougher than the UFC does. Got to get those bears out of hibernation.
I buy that. Don't mess with the dad. I'm telling you.
Exactly. There's just so much to this. There are like so many aspects to break this down, and lots of stuff to get into. But let's talk about Bellator, because Bellator has a.
One sec. James. You know when Sean goes off on those tangents and he leans to his right and yells at the top of his lungs?
Yeah.
Are you expecting, like I'm expecting, for his wife to just crash that door open and either hit him with a chair or be like, "What is wrong with you?"
Let me explain something right now.
Hey, I asked James.
My wife
James' opinion.
My wife is going to school full time right now. That means this sole income right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
On Monday and Tuesday, she hears me scream, right in the penis, over and over again. She understands. She knows I take my job very seriously, but not seriously enough to drive people away with complete and total boredom.
I'm in tears. James, I love when Sean loses his marbles like that. It reminds me of so many of my favorite comedians when they have the microphone and they just look at the crowd losing their minds. But I do expect Claire to come in there and just like, what is wrong with you, Sean?
I mean, isn't that wild? I mean, Vitaly Minakov was their champion.
Yes, you're right.
Damn good one. And they had their issues, and man, Bellator with their European talent is not what it used to be. But he's been out for 4.5 years. 4.5 years they have not had a heavyweight championship fight, and they have had some decent heavyweights. And if not decent heavyweights, some decent names. I love the tournament. Love the tournament. But I mean, this guy has went 7-0 in Fight Nights Global. He beat Bigfoot. He beat Tony Johnson. He beat some guys that people know about. And they're immediately just like, should he fight the winner? And I'm like, oh, son of a bitch. Just wedge him in there somehow. Wedge him in there somehow. But we do have some movement in this tournament, and I'm pretty excited. If you condense these two cards into one this weekend, because Bellator is running Friday and Saturday, it would be an outstanding card. But still, I think they're both pretty good. I am going to do a post show after UFC or Bellator 208 Saturday night. So we'll talk about both of these. But let's talk about the first one. On the prelims, you have Sinead Kavanaugh against Janae Harding. James Lynch did speak to, I believe it was Janae, correct?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
That is up on Fightful.com. Make sure y'all check that out. On the main card, you have Baby Slice against Cory Browning. There's not a lot to break down here. They're moving Baby Slice along slowly. He is somebody, I will say, he gets it. I think he gets the charismatic aspect as well, if not more than his dad did. Like, he is a very, very charismatic dude. And he knows what he needs to do to become successful in MMA, and I admire that. We have a Bellator welterweight tournament alternate fight, Pascu against Lorenz Larkin. I don't think this is the path they expected for Lorenz Larkin, James.
No, I don't think so. He's had what, 2 or 3 opponents, switch out or whatever. They got to try and get him in somehow. They got to keep him active. So this is a result of a couple fights, because it was Eric Silva, and then before that it was someone else. So he's just some unfortunate luck here, and fighting a vet. So you never know what can happen in this fight. But Larkin needs to definitely prove his stock, because he was one of the big signings from Bellator a few years back.
Joe, I mean, I would expect, and I think they expect Larkin to win this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's been the expectation that when you sign a guy like that he goes on a bit of a run and causes havoc in the division, specifically against the talent that you originally had, or you want the talent you originally had prior to the UFC guy coming over, and your talent beats him succinctly. Or bottom line is you got to maximize the revenue you can generate from a guy like Lorenz Larkin when he's competing for your organization. So you put him against Pascu, and you think, you better win this fight, dude. You got to win this fight.
Show is headlined by a couple of big heavyweight fights, essentially. Roy Nelson and Sergey Haratonov. I love Sergey Haratonov. I've been a fan of his for over a decade. He was one of my introductions into MMA. This is not an easy fight for Roy Nelson, and I'm going as far as to predict Sergey Haratonov to win. James, how do you think this one goes?
Yeah, I'm with you here. I just think the movement. I mean, he's had a couple hiccups in his career. If you remember Haratonov when he lost to Ayala, I believe that's how you say his name.
Ayala, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's had some hiccups before, but in general, he usually wins his fights. It's one of those guys I wish we would have saw in the UFC, but this is a great matchup. And I just think Nelson, I know he still has that knockout power. He kind of reminds me a bit of Derrick Lewis in that regard, where it's like he's not very mobile, but he can definitely knock you out. I like Haratonov here in terms of a pick. And right now he's an underdog at +200, so he might be taking a stab at. And one fight I want to mention that I don't know if we're going to cover, but Carrington Banks this was a late addition to the card. Carrington Banks is fighting Mandel Nallo. Joe, you might know a bit about Mandel. Yep. This guy is the secret weapon at TriStar. You ask any fighter that trains with the lighter weight classes, they say Mandel is the most talented guy in the room. Joe Duffy raves about this guy. He's 6-0. He's been buried on the prelims. He was actually like a big signing for Bellator, like in the Canadian MMA scene. 2017. So now he's up here. I think he can beat Banks here. He's got he's also an underdog on this card, plus 200. Take a stab at him. This guy is, I'm telling you, he's the secret weapon in Bellator's lightweight division. And Banks, ever since he switched camps over to Colorado, he was with he used to be with the Black Zillions. He lost his last fight to Piccolotti, so he needs to get back in the win column. I think this is a good opportunity for the Canadian to outshine him here.
You know, the funny thing is when we talked about Haritonov, you say he's had a few hiccups in his career. He's a guy who's been fighting since Pride, since 2003. He's beaten Ninja Hua, Semi Schilt, Pedro Hizzo, Fabricio Verdum, Alistair Overeem, even like lately, like Sokaju. He fought Sokaju last year. It's nuts how long he's been around. That's what I love about heavyweight MMA. Joe, who do you have in Haritonov versus Roy Nelson?
So on the surface, my mind immediately goes to, you know what, Roy Nelson wins this fight. But, you know, not many people know Sergey's not in his 40s. He's 38.
Yeah.
Roy Nelson's in his 40s. He's 42. Now, it's difficult per se to knock out Roy Nelson, but you can rest assured that there's going to be some pounding by Haritonov. If he can just keep his footwork, he should win this fight. You know, I've always been surprised, and I know Roy Nelson and his wife have told me dozens upon dozens of times that fans want exciting fights. That's the reason why I don't use my black belt from Renzo Gracie on the ground. If you'd have did that and started submitting people, maybe you'd be in a different world right now. I don't know. It's one of those tough fights to call, but you're damn right. Based on the odds right now, with Haritonov as a plus 200, I got 5 on it.
Yeah. Oh, I do too. I think that's a damn good one. Ryan Bader, Matt Mitrione. Ryan Bader trying to do the champ thing, and I think he stands a pretty good opportunity of doing it. Now, I am really interested to see the size discrepancy here between Mitrione and Bader. Bader is legitimately one of the best light heavyweights in the world. I can't wait to watch him fight. Joe, how do you think this goes?
Well, on the onset, speed kills. Ryan Bader will be the faster striker here. On the flip side, if you read the book Fightnomics, mass, speed equals force. Mitrione's going to be the bigger fighter, more powerful. He should be able to knock out Ryan Bader or TKO Ryan Bader with one punch that could lead to some sort of TKO on the ground. Thing is, though, with Ryan Bader, he's going to be faster. He's going to be quicker. I predict him going in and out, and he can take down Matt Mitrione. He could take him down and do what he needs to do in terms of grinding out a decision and mauling and brawling. So on the surface, I'm going to lean towards Ryan Bader. I'm not putting 5 on it because he's minus 280, but I'll predict Ryan Bader emerges victorious in this fight. I think his speed will be a bit too much for Mitrione in this fight.
James, how do you think it goes? Bader has technically fought at heavyweight, but he fought King Mo. There were 2 light heavyweights fighting.
Yeah, I like Bader as well here. Like Joe said, the speed's going to be a factor. And there's been a couple moments for Mitrione in Bellator where he hasn't looked that great. I mean, the Fedor fight, we forget that Fedor knocked him down. It was just he happened to get to his feet first and was able to finish the fight. There's that fight against Ole Thompson. He's had a couple moments in Bellator where it's been a little bit iffy. He gets that majority decision over Nelson. I think that was a fight he should have gone out there and got a big finish on. And Bader's been the opposite. I mean, this guy's been looking like a killer, going through everyone. I think if Bader's smart, because it's 5 rounds, you try and drag this out as long as you can and wait till Mitrione's tired and then you capitalize, because I think, again, his cardio and speed will be a lot better. So give me Bader in this one, but I'm like Joe said, no bet for me on this one.
Yeah, I'm going with Bader as well. I'm in the same boat as both of you guys. And then we have another big, technically heavyweight fight the next night, but a nice card supporting that. We have another Gracie debuting. I think it's Hobson Gracie Jr. And the Bellator prelims are Bellator prelims, essentially. But you have Henry Corrales, Andy Main. You have Chet Congo and Timothy Johnson, 2 UFC veterans doing it. Chet Congo, quite frankly, can be the most boring fighter in the world, or he can be the most exciting fighter in the world. It's a heavyweight fight, James. So to me, it's like grab a coin and flip it.
Yeah, that's kind of the way you look at it. But I would have to favor Timothy Johnson here, just with the fact he's a little bit younger. Congo, I mean, I know the guy looks like a supermodel in terms of his physique, but he's a slow guy, and I think Johnson, he's a guy that always finds a way to win. I mean, the weird thing with Johnson is he's coming off a win in the UFC, and they couldn't come to terms, and he ended up going to Bellator. So he's a guy that probably would still be winning in the UFC. So I put some stock into that. And Congo, again, coming off the win over Ayala, but that was back in May. Give me Timothy Johnson this fight. I like him.
Joe.
Yeah, I'm not putting 5 on it, but Timothy Johnson, I think, is going to attack. He's a minus 170, Sean. There's no chance I'm putting 5 on it. So I look for Timothy Johnson to seize the opportunity and realize, hey, man, I'm fighting a name guy here. I can get another. I can add this to my resume. I can look pretty damn good at taking out Czech Congo, but protect your chin. Protect your chin. Czech may not be the most exciting fighter. He's a very controversial fighter. He's very unpredictable. But I think Timothy Johnson can pull this off. And don't be surprised if Czech Congo's leg kicking game increases in this fight here. I'm just throwing it out there.
Speaking of fighting a name guy, you have Anatoly Tokov facing Alexander Shlemenko. This is a big fight for Tokov, facing a former champion. Shlemenko is a guy that Bellator clearly thinks a lot of. They brought him back, but he's lost 2 fights in a row. And we've seen Shlemenko in that spot before. He lost to Ortiz and Halsey back-to-back and was able to rebound pretty well. But, James, how do you think this one goes? I think Shlemenko is on a bit of a downside. I think Tokov could take this.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I like Tokov as well. I think with Shlemenko, say what you want. I think he probably beat Gegard Mousasi in that fight, but I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Mousasi's eye was, the size of a baseball after the first round. But yeah, he's coming off a loss to Bruno Silva in M1 Challenge, a guy who was 17-6. To me, I think this is just one of those things where he's too inconsistent, and I like sort of the I don't want to call him a newcomer, but he kind of is in a way. Give me Tokov in this fight. I think there's definitely some value there as far as him as a pick, and well, actually, he's the favorite. I see minus 165. I might throw some on that just with the fact that I think Shlemenko's on the downside.
Joe.
Yeah, Shlemenko's on the downside, but we're talking about a 28-year-old Tokov who's 28-2. This is a bad human being. He's got 15 KOs, and he can submit you. He's got 6 submissions. So anywhere this fight goes, provided he keeps his head in check and realizes he is fighting a veteran, be expected to compete for 15 minutes, seize your opportunity. I mean, the fact that Alexander's last fight was a first-round KO or TKO, I think it was. Capitalize, strike, move, strike, move. It presents itself, you go for the KO, and I think that's what's going to happen here. And like James, although James did say he could put 5 on it, no, he's the favorite, and I think he's the favorite for a reason. I like this line. Of all the lines on the 2 shows, this one is very fair.
To say that Ben Henderson's Bellator career has not gone the way that most expected would be an understatement. He is 2-3. One of his wins is a leg injury to Tricky Pitbull. The other one is a win over Roger Huerta, who hasn't been relevant since before Ben Henderson was relevant. Ben Henderson is not getting a gimme fight in Syed Awad. Syed Awad has won 4 in a row. He has been a guy that has been around in Bellator forever. It seems like it's only been about 5 years, but it seems like it's been forever. I know that he first fought there like almost a decade ago. But Joe, I feel like Ben Henderson can get it done, and I think he will. But if you make a mistake with a guy like Syed Awad, he will put you away. Even though he's not a consistent finisher, he is a guy that has been known to finish here and there. Like he beat Zach Freeman fresh off of Freeman's big win over Aaron Pico. He may have put Ryan Couture out to pasture for all we know. Well, no, I think Ryan Couture's fighting next month. But how do you think this one goes?
I think Ben Henderson's the reason, or is the favorite for a reason, although I think it's too large of a spread. He's minus 445 to Syed's plus 315. I would have made that a little smaller, maybe in the high 290, James. I don't know. But Ben Henderson still has it. It's a matter of how motivated is Benson Henderson? Where does this fight, other than a paycheck, lead for him, right? Yeah, you can't sleep on Awad because Awad will sleep you real quick. But I just think that Benson Henderson is just too savvy of a veteran to allow Awad to pull off a victory. It is MMA. Anything can happen. Don't get me wrong. But I think Benson Henderson does walk away with this fight. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a submission.
James, can Ben Henderson get his first real momentum in Bellator, or is Syed Awad going to move to 5 in a row?
I'm picking Henderson, but I don't think this is where the odds indicate the fight. I see Henderson right now is like a minus 445 favorite. There's value on Awad here for sure. Yeah. I mean, here's a guy, who's actually, it's funny. I was thinking that Awad was the younger guy, but he's actually a year older than Henderson. Just Henderson's been fighting for so long. Awad, he's got some good wins. You mentioned the Freeland one, the Couture one looked good as well. He's had some losses as well, kind of bouncing between weight classes. So this is at 155, which I think is good for both guys. I'll go Henderson, but I think it's going to be a decision. I think it's going to be a closer fight than people think. But Awad could pull this one off. You know, I think the thing with Henderson too is he's just taken a lot of punishment over the last couple fights, and I think that's gonna play a bit of a role in this fight. And you've got a guy in Awad who really has nothing to lose. Henderson has everything to lose. He was the big signing, the former UFC champion. When you have a mentality like that, I mean, we saw it last week with Anthony Pettis. He had his moments against Tony Ferguson. I think we're going to see a similar thing here with Syed Awad. But again, pick is Henderson. But if I'm playing a bet in this fight, it's Syed Awad, who right now is plus 315.
Main event: Chael Sonnen, Fedor Emelianenko. This is a freak show fight. Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix semifinals. Look, here's the thing. I want to break this down from a technical aspect, but it's like, what's the point? It's hard to say. I don't know how washed either of these two men really are. James, what do you see unfolding in this fight?
I see Fedor Emelianenko getting his hand raised, and I know Chael Sonnen, you know, he's gone on a bit of a run here in Bellator, and it's actually weird to think that Sonnen has now fought John Jones, Anderson Silva twice, you know, Rashad Evans, like he's fought the who's who, and now he's fighting Fedor. Like, how crazy is that? Tito Ortiz. I don't know anyone who's fought as many legends as that, but I think this is going to be where the train stops for Chael Sonnen. Emelianenko, he's still got that knockout power, and I think at some point, if he does catch Chael Sonnen, I think it could be, you know, the type of thing where it's going to be a TKO finish. He pops Sonnen, he ends up going on top and laying some ground and pound there. I'm going Fedor Emelianenko in this fight. You know, not as quickly as the Mir fight, but I think maybe a second or third round finish here. Right now, the odds makers agree he's minus 255. So yeah, I got to go Fedor in this one, but no bet.
Since Sonnen lost to Anderson Silva the first time, he fought Brian Stan. That was the least known name that he fought. Since then, as you mentioned, Bisping, Anderson Silva, John Jones, Shogun Rua, Rashad Evans, Tito Ortiz, Vanderlei, Rampage, and now Fedor. So when people tell me Conor McGregor's irrelevant now, he lost. No. And Conor McGregor is 5 times more charismatic and better at what he does in that regard than a Chael Sonnen. Also, he doesn't have he's got plenty of issues, not necessarily the issues that Chael Sonnen had that kept him out of the cage. Chael Sonnen still getting fights, 41 years old, and he's facing Fedor Emelianenko, once known as the greatest fighter ever.
What's the Fightful policy on Showdown Joe giving his opinion on the bad guy who I don't want to ever speak negatively of?
Who's that? What?
Well, I don't want to pick against Chael Sonnen.
How dare you?
But I have to pick against Chael Sonnen.
Be objective.
Fedor Emelianenko, I think, brings more to this fight, although I do want to say this. If the bad guy, and a lot of people don't know how his brain generally ticks, if the bad guy is motivated, he will win this fight. If he's just looking at this as, I'm in the heavyweight tournament, blah, 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 I'm going to fight Fedor, this is awesome, he will lose. He will lose. But if he's motivated, comes in there, executes whatever game plan he trained, he can pull off this upset. Remember, when he fought Shogun, he was supposed to be the sacrificial lamb, and he tapped out Shogun. No one taps out Shogun per se. He tapped out Shogun. That was a very motivated Chael Sonnen. Although he was motivated against the other fighters, that was a very motivated Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen has the ability to surprise a lot of people, despite his age, despite how much he talks. I just think Fedor, if I break this fight down, striking-wise, Fedor has the power. He's the better striker. He should win the stand-up battle. This fight goes down to the ground because Chael Sonnen's wrestling gets it there. Fedor's not that easy to take down. But if it does go to the ground, I think Fedor's a better submission artist. So everywhere I look at this fight, screams Fedor Emelianenko. I'm going to go with Fedor in this fight. I'm rooting for Chael.
I will have a live post show after Bellator 208 talking about both of those shows. Make sure you all check it out. And of course, come here every Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Check out FightfulSelect.com. We are adding more and more MMA content. Want to make that your go-to for both pro wrestling and MMA bonus content. Most importantly, check out FightfulMMA.com. When you go to the individual sites like Fightful Wrestling, Fightful MMA, Fightful Boxing, we have tabs there that say exclusives, results, all that good stuff. Click that exclusives tab. You'll see a ton of James Lynch's interviews. He has more coverage of UFC Moncton Is that the right way to pronounce it?
Yeah, it is Moncton. Yeah.
Moncton than anybody else. I'm talking Misha Serkinov, Volkan Ozdemir, all kinds of people. Make sure you all check that out. James, let the people know what you're up to this week.
Nothing, just plugging away, trying to look at that UFC 230 card now, trying to set some interviews up for that. But like you said, UFC Moncton, we got you covered. Anthony Smith as well we got. So we have both the main event, Misha Serkinov, Nasrat Hakparat. I mean, you just name it. Just go to Fightful. We got all the interviews up there. And just follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Lynch on Sports, LYNCH. And thanks for a great show today, guys. It's a lot of fun. A little heated back and forth. I like that stuff.
I like it. Joe, what do you get going on this week?
Yeah, probably just going to do my hair. So not that no, it's a typical crazy busy week for me. Same old, same old. Just paying attention to what's happening here. Lots of calls to make it, not just in the mortgage world. Lots of calls.
Sorry to interrupt you, Joe.
Wow.
Oh my God, it's beautiful.
You reminded me I've got to wash my kitchen floors. But yeah, so it'll be a busy week for me, and we'll take it from there. Looking forward to seeing what happens in the mixed martial arts world, because I'm paying damn close attention to what's happening with Khabib. So,
just a heads up, guys, there will be an alternate host. Jimmy Van will be out of town this week, so Listen You Boy will be a little bit different this week. Check that out, Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Most importantly, thumbs up, subscribe. We are on podcast platforms everywhere. And let people know about Fightful MMA. We're still a very young, independent MMA website. So let people know about us. Thank you all so much. Until next time, check out the Aftermath podcast from Sunday, the UFC 229 post show, and all of James Lynch's interviews. We are out.